My name's Mike. I'm 47, and I live in Duluth, Minnesota. You'd think at this age, you'd have a good grip on who your family is and what you mean to them, but life has a funny way of gut-punching you when you least expect it. For most of my adult life, I played the role of the dependable older brother. My younger brother, Sean, was always the charismatic one, the guy who could walk into a room and have people eating out of his hand. Me? I was the guy who showed up when the car broke down or when someone needed help paying the electric bill. Sean married young, had 2 kids, and bounced from job to job, never quite getting his feet under him. So, like the good brother I was raised to be, I helped. Rent when they were short. Christmas gifts when they were broke. Groceries when the fridge was empty. I always told myself it was temporary, that Sean just needed a little lift until he got on track. But years passed, and nothing changed. Looking back, I should have seen the cracks forming. The constant, next month, I'll pay you back. The way my parents tiptoed around Sean's messes. The fact that he always seemed to have money for football bets but never for his kids' school shoes. But when you're in the middle of it, you don't always see the shape of the storm you're standing in. The real breaking point didn't come from Sean himself, though. It came wrapped in tinsel and garland, at what should have been a joyful family gathering Christmas Eve. That Christmas Eve, I showed up at Sean's place with a car full of gifts, like I did every year. His kids, Emma and Tyler, came flying out the door, faces lit up, shrieking my name. That right there, that's why I kept doing it. For them, not for Sean. Not even for his wife, Lisa, though she always seemed more grateful than he ever was. Inside, the house was its usual chaos, wrapping paper scraps, a tree missing half its ornaments because the dog kept pulling them down, the faint smell of something burning in the kitchen. I handed out the gifts, cracked open a beer, and settled into my usual role, Uncle Mike, the guy who makes sure the night stays afloat. But the mood shifted when Sean swaggered into the room. He had that look I'd come to know all too well, the half-drunken smirk, the edge of something sharp in his voice, like he was just waiting to pick a fight. And sure enough, it didn't take long. He started with little digs. Oh, must be nice to have all that free time and cash. Huh, Mike? And moved on to louder jabs, poking at the fact that I was still single, that I didn't have real responsibilities. I brushed it off at first. I'd had years of practice. But then he crossed a line. He stood up, lifted his beer, and with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes, he called me a loser in front of the whole family. A useless, lonely loser. And then, the final gut punch, he told me not to bother coming to Christmas anymore if I was going to show off, and rub it in his face. For a second, the room froze. Lisa looked horrified. The kids stared at the floor. And my parents, well, that was the moment that crushed something in me. They didn't defend me. They just shuffled in awkward silence, casting nervous glances at Sean like they were scared to upset him. I left. Not in a dramatic, slamming the door kind of way. I just quietly put on my coat, gave Emma and Tyler one last hug, and walked out into the Minnesota cold, my breath sharp in the air, my heart thudding like a drum I couldn't quiet. I spent that night sitting in my car outside my apartment, watching the snow fall. And something inside me broke loose, a quiet, clear decision. I was done. Done being the safety net. Done showing up. Done playing the fool. It was a few weeks later when Lisa called. Her voice was low, shaky. She told me Sean had gambled away the last of their savings, the money I'd given to help with rent, groceries, the kids' school expenses. All of it, gone on poker tables and online bets. She was scared. She didn't know how to tell the kids. For a moment, I felt the old reflex kick in, the urge to step in, to fix it. But then I took a breath, and another, and realized, no. This time, the man who made the mess could clean it up. And as the weeks unfolded, and Sean's life unraveled, job lost, house at risk, friends backing away, I found myself at peace. But here's the twist. I didn't turn my back on everyone. I started helping Lisa directly. Quietly. Groceries dropped off without a note. An envelope with school money slipped into her mailbox. Not a dime to Sean, though. I let him face the collapse he built with his own hands. Funny thing is, I've never felt lighter. Word got around fast in Duluth. It's that kind of town, where people know when you sneeze before you've grabbed a tissue. I started getting the calls from my parents first. My mom, voice trembling, asking if I'd heard about Sean losing his job, about the eviction notice pinned to their door. My dad, more gruff, mumbling about family sticking together and how it's just a rough patch. But here's the kicker, not once did Sean call me himself. No apology, no explanation, no olive branch. Nothing. And that silence spoke louder than any angry voicemail ever could. I remember sitting on my porch one cold January night, phone buzzing with another message from my mom, staring out at the frozen lake. I thought about all the years I spent stretching myself thin, about all the times I bailed Sean out, covered for him, smoothed things over. And it hit me. I hadn't been helping him. I'd been enabling him. I was the life preserver that kept him from ever learning to swim. That realization cracked something wide open in me. So, when Lisa called again, this time from a women's shelter, voice hushed and scared, telling me she was leaving Sean and needed a place to land, I didn't hesitate. I opened my door. I made up the guest room. I helped her find an apartment. Not because I wanted revenge on Sean. Not because I wanted to play the hero. But because Lisa and the kids deserved better. And, if I'm honest, maybe I needed to prove to myself that I could still be decent without being a doormat. Here's where the twist came. One night, maybe 2 months after Lisa left, I ran into Sean at the grocery store. I hadn't seen him since Christmas. He looked worn down. Scruffy beard, sunken eyes, a man dragging around the weight of his own collapse. And still, he walked up to me like nothing had happened. Like we were just two brothers, picking up frozen pizzas on a Thursday night. He gave me this half smile, this shrug, and said, "Hey, man, you good for $20? Like we were teenagers again, scrounging change for gas. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw the whole ugly picture, all the years of excuses, the charming grins, the promises to change that never lasted more than a weekend. And you know what? I felt nothing. No rage. No sorrow. Just this quiet, clean space where all the old wounds used to live. I told him no. Calm, steady, simple. And when he chuckled like it was some kind of joke, I just walked away. That was the night I stopped mourning the brother I wanted and accepted the brother I had. After that night in the grocery store, something in me settled. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without waiting for the next crisis to yank the air out of my lungs. I focused on work, on myself, on being present in my own life, something I hadn't realized I'd been neglecting while trying to patch Sean's holes. And quietly, without much fanfare, a new chapter began. Lisa and the kids were adjusting to their apartment, and Emma and Tyler started coming by on weekends. At first, it was awkward. Tyler barely spoke. Emma watched me with these wide, cautious eyes like she wasn't sure which version of Uncle Mike she'd get. But little by little, we settled into a rhythm. Saturday mornings became pancake mornings. Afternoons turned into board games and trips to the park. And me? I started remembering who I was outside of the guy who bails out his brother. But of course, nothing stays peaceful forever. One afternoon, about 3 months after Lisa left Sean, I got a call from my dad. His voice was tight, clipped, the voice he used when he was trying not to lose his temper. He said Sean had shown up at their house, drunk, ranting about how I'd turned everyone against him and how I'd stolen his family. My parents, bless them, were finally starting to see Sean's patterns, but they were still caught between wanting to help and not knowing how. "Maybe," my dad said hesitantly, "you could reach out?" I sat there on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the floor. And for the first time in my life, I said it out loud. "No, Dad. I can't fix this." There was a long pause, and then the quietest thing I've ever heard from him. "Okay, son." It was the tiniest crack in a dam that had been holding for decades. About a week later, Lisa called with an update I hadn't expected. She told me Sean had checked himself into rehab. Not because anyone forced him, because he hit rock bottom so hard it finally rattled something loose in him. I sat there holding the phone, heart thudding, not sure whether to laugh, cry, or feel absolutely nothing. And you know what I landed on? Relief. Not the kind that says, "Oh, good, everything's fixed." But the kind that says, "I'm not carrying this anymore." For the first time in a long time, I felt light. You'd think that would be the neat, satisfying ending. The brother hits rock bottom, gets help, the family heals. But life, as I've learned, doesn't wrap things up in tidy little bows. Sean being in rehab didn't erase the years of damage. It didn't refill the bank accounts or erase the sting of Christmas Eve, or change the fact that his kids had watched their father spiral. It didn't wipe away the ache I still felt when I thought about how my parents had stood there in silence, letting me walk out that night. What it did, though, was shift the ground under all of us. Suddenly, the roles we'd all clung to, me as the fixer, Sean as the screw-up, my parents as the enablers, didn't fit as neatly. And that was where the real work began. A few weeks after Sean went into rehab, my mom asked if we could all meet for dinner. Just the four of us. No Lisa, no kids, just the original cast of this messy family play. I almost said no. Every part of me recoiled at the idea of sitting across from my parents and rehashing everything. But something in my mom's voice, the tiredness, maybe, or the thin thread of hope, made me agree. We met at a little diner on London Road, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and waitresses who call you honey. I sat down, heart pounding, ready for a fight, but it didn't come. Instead, my dad cleared his throat, and, in a voice rough with something I didn't quite recognize at first, said, "We should have stood up for you, Mike. We should have seen what we were asking of you all those years." And just like that, the air shifted. My mom reached across the table, her hand trembling, and told me she was sorry, not just for that night, but for all the times they leaned on me when they should have been parenting Sean. I didn't know what to do with that. For so long, I'd carried this quiet resentment, tucked it away like a stone in my pocket. And now here they were, handing me an opening I never expected. I told them the truth, that I wasn't angry anymore, just tired, that I loved them, but I needed to live my own life without constantly running triage on Sean's. And you know what? They nodded. They listened. It wasn't a movie ending. Nobody stood up and made a dramatic toast. But for the first time, we sat together not as roles, but as people, bruised, flawed, maybe even a little hopeful. And when I left that night, stepping out into the cold Duluth air, I realized something. Sometimes peace doesn't come when everything is fixed. Sometimes peace comes when you finally let go of trying to fix it. Life after that dinner didn't magically turn into a perfect family movie. Sean was still in rehab. My parents were still figuring out how to stop treating him like a fragile child, and I was still trying to unlearn the habit of bracing myself every time the phone rang. But something had shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't running on empty. I had space to think about things beyond the next emergency. I picked up hobbies I'd forgotten. Hiking the trails near Gooseberry Falls, playing guitar in the evenings, volunteering once a week at the local food bank. It was like rediscovering parts of myself I hadn't even realized I'd buried under years of stress and obligation. And then, something unexpected happened. One Saturday, while I was helping Emma and Tyler with a school project at my place, Lisa stopped by to drop off some supplies. She lingered in the doorway a little longer than usual, watching the kids laugh at the kitchen table. There was a tired softness in her face, the kind that comes from surviving a storm and still standing. After the kids went home that evening, she texted me, "Thank you for all of it." It hit me in a way I didn't expect. I sat there on the couch, phone in hand, feeling this strange mix of gratitude and sadness. Gratitude that I could be part of something good. Sadness that it had come from so much wreckage. And just when I thought the universe was finally settling down, another twist arrived. One night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. I was halfway through an old movie, beer in hand. But something made me look. It was Sean. He wrote, "Hey, I'm getting out next week. Would like to talk if you're up for it." I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it, toss the phone across the room, pretend it had never arrived. But another part, the part that remembered we were brothers long before we were this mess, told me to wait. I didn't reply that night. Instead, I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the snow fall under the streetlight. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't making a plan or writing a mental script for what I'd say. I just sat there, letting the quiet fill me. And it felt okay, because here's what I was finally starting to understand. Sometimes you don't need to have an answer ready. Sometimes you just need to let the next moment come. The days leading up to Sean's release were quieter than I expected. No panicked calls from my parents, no surprise visits from Lisa, no restless pacing on my end. Just an odd, suspended calm. When the day came, I got up early without even meaning to, made coffee, and sat by the window, watching the lake thaw in the early spring sun. My phone stayed silent. I almost convinced myself that maybe Sean had changed his mind, that maybe I'd never hear from him again. Part of me even hoped for that. It would have been simpler. But life doesn't do simple. The message came around 2 p.m. "Hey, can we meet somewhere?" Coffee. I stared at it for a long moment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed out 3 different replies, erased them all, and finally just wrote back. "Sure. The diner on London Road at 4? He replied within seconds. "Yeah, thanks." I arrived early, heart hammering like I was walking into a job interview. I took the corner booth, the one with the chipped formica table, and tried to look casual, but every muscle in my body was tight. Sean walked in right on time. He looked different. Still Sean, the same familiar face I'd known all my life, but smaller, like life had taken a chisel to him and carved away the swagger. He slid into the booth across from me. I was darting around like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be there. For a second, neither of us said anything. Finally, he spoke, voice rough. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I felt something in my chest clench, like my heart wasn't sure whether to harden or soften. I took a breath and let it out slowly. He kept going about the money, about Christmas, about the years I spent propping him up. He didn't make excuses, didn't ask for anything. He just sat there, owning it. And I realized, sitting there in that cracked booth with the sun slanting in through the blinds, that this was the first real conversation we'd had as adults. Not as the golden child and the fixer, not as the screw-up and the safety net, but as two battered human beings, trying to figure out what was left. I didn't forgive him that day, not fully. Forgiveness, I was learning, is a long road, not a handshake across a Formica table. But I heard him. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. After that meeting at the diner, things didn't transform overnight. Sean didn't magically become a model citizen, and I didn't suddenly erase years of resentment with a cup of coffee. But something essential shifted between us, a thread of honesty we'd never had before. For the first few weeks, Sean kept his distance. I think he understood that trust wasn't something you snap your fingers and rebuild. He sent the occasional text, updates about his meetings, a photo of his new job sweeping floors at a local hardware store, a message when he ran into Lisa and the kids and kept it civil. And I gave him space. Lisa and I talked more now, usually about the kids. Emma had started painting. Tyler had joined his soccer team. They were healing in their own way, piecing together a life after the storm. Sometimes when I dropped off groceries or helped with a school project, I caught glimpses of them laughing again, big, unguarded laughs. Those moments reminded me why I'd stayed in their lives, even when cutting Sean out. And then came the moment I never expected. One Saturday afternoon, I was fixing a broken porch step at Lisa's place when I heard a car pull up. I looked over my shoulder, and there was Sean, standing by the curb, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. No swagger, no forced grin. Just Sean. Lisa froze in the doorway. The kids peeked out from behind her, wide-eyed. Sean lifted a hand in an awkward half-wave and said, "I just wanted to say hi to the kids. If that's okay." For a second, nobody moved. Then, without a word, Lisa stepped aside. I watched as Sean crouched on the sidewalk, arms open, waiting. Emma approached first, hesitant, then Tyler darted past her, wrapping himself around his dad. And just like that, the sharp edges softened, not disappeared, but softened. I didn't jump in to mediate, didn't try to script the moment. I just stood on the porch, tools in hand, watching this family of mine stumble towards something that looked like repair. And for the first time in years, I realized I didn't need to fix everything. Some things, if you give them time and space, start mending on their own. The weeks that followed felt like walking on thin ice. I didn't know if Sean's effort would stick or if we were all just waiting for the cracks to form again. But I made a choice, maybe the first truly intentional choice in years, to stop trying to predict the next disaster. Instead, I focused on small things. Emma brought over one of her paintings, a watercolor of a loon on the lake, and I framed it, hung it right in my living room. Tyler asked if I could come to one of his soccer games, and for the first time, I said yes without thinking about what might go wrong. And Sean, well, Sean kept surprising me. He stayed in touch, but cautiously. A text here, a check-in there. Never asking for anything, never pretending we were back to normal, just staying present. There was one message that caught me off guard. "Hey, I'm taking a class. Thinking about finishing my GED." I sat with that message for a long time, rereading it, wondering when was the last time I'd seen Sean follow through on something just for himself. Maybe never. Around that time, my parents reached out. They wanted to have everyone over for dinner, and this time, everyone included Lisa and the kids. I hesitated. Old wounds don't vanish just because you slap a bandage on them. But Lisa surprised me when I asked if she wanted to go. She said, "Maybe it's time." So one cool Sunday evening, we all sat around the same table where so much had gone wrong. The air was heavy at first, like we were all waiting for a spark to hit the wrong nerve. But then Tyler cracked a joke about his soccer coach, Emma showed off her art project, and slowly, the tension started to melt. Sean was quieter than I remembered, less the center of attention, more a man relearning how to take up space without swallowing the room. At one point, he looked across the table, met my eyes, and just gave me a small nod. No words. Just that. And for some reason, it meant more than anything he could have said. That night, as I drove home under the streetlights, I realized something that startled me. I wasn't holding my breath anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was what healing actually looked like. Not a perfect ending, but a life with space to exhale. After that family dinner, something strange happened. Life kept going. No big blow-ups, no dramatic confessions, no sudden collapses. Just life. And that, more than anything, felt like the real miracle. Sean settled into his job at the hardware store, picking up extra shifts, sometimes sending me photos of shelves he'd built or repairs he'd finished. His texts were short, sometimes awkward, but they came regularly. Lisa and the kids started to loosen the last of their tension. Emma painted a portrait of their family, and this time, she included Sean. Tyler asked if he could invite his dad to one of his games. Lisa agreed, cautiously, and Sean showed up, quiet on the sidelines, cheering at the right moments, leaving without making it about himself. For me, the shift was quieter but just as deep. I started sleeping through the night. No more jolting awake at 3 a.m., heart racing, wondering what disaster was coming. I went back to playing guitar, this time not to drown things out, but just for the joy of it. And maybe the biggest change of all, I began letting people help me. One evening, I came home to find Lisa and the kids on my porch, holding bags of groceries. "Your turn," Lisa said with a smirk, and for once, I didn't argue. I let them stock my fridge and laughed when Emma teased me about the sad state of my spice rack. And then came a small, unexpected moment with Sean. One afternoon, I stopped by the hardware store for some paint. Sean was behind the counter, ringing up an elderly couple. When he saw me, his face lit up, not with the old bravado, but with something simpler. After the couple left, he walked over, wiped his hands on his apron, and said, "Hey, you got a minute after this?" We sat on a bench outside, the air warm with the first real hints of summer. Sean fidgeted with his hands, then said softly, "I'm trying, Mike. I know I've got a long way to go, but I'm trying." I sat there, hands folded, listening. And after a moment, I clapped him on the shoulder and said the truest thing I could. "I know." And I did. For the first time, I believed it.